Here, each person was laid to rest with the bones of their ancestors. They were part of the whole, united in death.
It's the creation of another world inside a little hill. It's almost like fairies, where you bury your ancestors. And the ancestors are in a different world, and often you approach them through a long passage. And this is why these things are often called passage graves or passage tombs. Sometimes the passage is aligned on a shaft of sunlight of the rising sun at a particular time of year, one of the solstices. So these are probably things where rituals take place, particularly at these critical times of year. The ossuaries, the place where the bones are kept, is a separate chamber approached by this long passage. Go in and they commune with the ancestors. So you mustn't think of these just as a repository of bones. They are places of active worship. In a sense, tomb is the wrong word to use. And the rituals, I think, in many cases, are communicating directly with the ancestors, probably by using hallucinatory devices, and in these altered states of consciousness, they thought that they were communicating directly with the spirits of their ancestors. And a very powerful set of circumstances. You're in total darkness at the end of a long tunnel, surrounded by their bones, and getting stoned on whatever it is that you're taking. And this must have been an enormously powerful emotional experience. They were probably using these little braziers with holes in their sides for burning something that you inhaled, and it wasn't just for the nice smell, it was almost certainly something that was a mind-altering substance.
To these people, individuality in death didn't matter.
It all came to an end, and there are no surviving members of this tradition. People just don't do it anymore. It was a magnificent experiment, and then it was over.
Far away, in the Middle East, a revolution was starting, which would end this vision of community forever. Human identity would never be the same again. In the Wadi Hanan, in southern Jordan, green malachite was exposed by flash flooding in a riverbed. It's one of the sources of copper.
The thing that's fairly clear about malachite ore is that there was a lot of it around. In places like Wadi Faynan, it's one of the predominant rocks. Anyone that made a fireplace in Wadi Faynan out of the green rock was going to realise that this stuff melted at pretty low temperatures. And it wouldn't take them too long to know how to fashion this melted stone into a variety of forms. And better still, you could do it over and over again.
The miners were inspired by the colour. They ground it into beads for jewellery without smelting it. But they had customers from the other side of the Dead Sea who wanted huge quantities.
They had a monopoly, that is, the people living in the Beersheba Valley, about 150 kilometers from here over there, on metal production, i.e. they would send their miners, their traders over here to procure the ore, to mine the ore, and then put it on the donkeys and sort of schlep it back across the desert to the Beersheba Valley.
These traders had a secret. the exact way of heating the ore to create something fabulous. By superheating with blowpipes, they created the first true smelted metal. Copper was used to make everything from ornaments to daggers. Not only that, it could be endlessly recast into other shapes.
We're actually finding copper objects abandoned, which is very strange. Copper crucibles and the nozzles of bellows, which show us that they're actually making those objects on that site. And they're a long way from any copper. The nearest copper is over in the Wadi Araba in Jordan, yeah? The other side of the Dead Sea and the other side of the Wadi Araba. And there we've got people who are apparently mining and smelting copper. And there's hardly anybody living there to use the stuff. So presumably, again, we've got networks. And people living in southern Israel know how to get the materials they need from people who live in what is today southern Jordan. And people in southern Jordan who are sitting on the top of metal resources know that there are people living over to the west of them quite a long way away, several days' walk. Yeah? But there's a market, as we would say in terms of our modern economics. They know that there's people over there who want the stuff.
Smelted copper was the first metal, and very exotic. It was a prime trade item, and the prime traders were the Rasulians. They loved a chance to show off, and copper could be cast into such wonderful shapes.
Occasionally, people hid away the kind of things that they were making, not just the odd axe and chisel and mundane, trivial, everyday implements of that kind, but really special things. There's a couple of sites where we now have the most extraordinary hoards, extraordinary not just in the volume of metal and the quality of the technology, but the quite extraordinary things that they were making. These are not everyday objects. It's impossible to work out what kind of function these objects had. They seem to be emblems and kind of symbolic things which were placed on tops of staffs. And we have them simply because someone wrapped them all up in a reed mat and hid them away in a cave and never got back to collect them.
There's something desperate about this hoard. It was dumped in a cave so deep it would be hidden for 6,000 years. Rasul was in trouble. Their powerful neighbors, Egypt and Mesopotamia, had developed massive irrigation schemes of their own. They had their own olives and salt. Suddenly, they ceased trade with Rasul, and this wonderfully complex culture disappeared within 100 years.
Most of the most brilliant aspects of the Rasulian culture die with it. The wall paintings and many of the more elaborate organisational features. What seems to survive is the new specialised productive agricultural economy. Speculation has had it that what we see is the old elites, wedded to the land and wedded to the old religious values, seem not to survive. The new elites, perhaps more wedded to the production of agricultural surpluses, and as has been speculated, as the economy comes into stress, as the environment collapses, those people that cleave to the old ideas that the gods could be made to provide a decent landscape must have suffered when that landscape would not respond to repeated offerings.
Rasul was one of the first great trading societies. The survivors took their skills outwards, showing how to live by trade rather than farming. It was a dazzling idea, which moved from the Middle East towards Europe.